The sun hung low over the Nevada horizon, its heat shimmering off the cracked asphalt that led to the Navy Recruitment Center. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single dust-covered truck that looked like it had survived a few too many desert storms. From it stepped Sarah Mitchell, wearing jeans, boots, and a faded gray t-shirt that said Reno Rodeo 2009. Her blonde hair was tied back into a tight braid, and her eyes, a sharp steel gray, scanned the building ahead with calm purpose. Inside, the air conditioning hummed. Posters of soldiers, ships, and helicopters lined the walls, each shouting bold slogans about courage and honor. The recruiter behind the counter, a middle-aged petty officer named Danvers, barely looked up when she entered. He'd seen hundreds of eager faces come and go, high schoolers dreaming of glory, farmers' sons seeking escape, adrenaline junkies who thought they were invincible. But he wasn't expecting someone like her. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone polite but curious. "I'm here to enlist," Sarah said evenly, sliding her ID and paperwork across the counter. He raised an eyebrow. "Any particular field you're interested in?" She didn't hesitate. "Special operations. Sniper program, specifically." Danvers blinked. He'd heard odd requests before, but this one caught him off guard. "You're serious?" Her stare didn't waver. Very. There was no arrogance in her voice, just certainty. It wasn't the tone of someone chasing attention. It was the tone of someone who already knew what she was capable of. Danvers cleared his throat. "Well, that's ambitious. You know how competitive that program is, right? Only a few dozen make it through every year." "I know," Sarah said, almost absently, as she signed the rest of her forms. "I just need the chance." By the time her file made its way up the chain to the Naval Special Warfare Recruitment Division, it caused a ripple. Female applicants for sniper training were rare, and female candidates who could actually qualify were almost unheard of. The file eventually landed on the desk of Commander Ethan Cole, head of advanced marksmanship training for the SEALs. Cole was a battle-hardened man in his 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. His reputation was built on precision, discipline, and an unwavering belief in standards. He flipped through Sarah's file with a skeptical frown. Born and raised on a ranch outside Carson City, Nevada. Top grades in math and physics. No prior military experience. But what caught his attention were her civilian marksmanship records. Local competitions, extreme distance shooting tournaments, all with perfect scores. He leaned back in his chair, chuckling. A rodeo girl who thinks she can outshoot SEALs. Great. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Brooks, smirked. "Want me to flag it, sir?" Cole hesitated. He didn't like turning people away without proof they couldn't make it. Still, something about the confidence in her handwritten note on the application form. "I don't talk much. I shoot better than I speak," intrigued him. "Send her through," he finally said. "Let's see how long she lasts." The first day of training at the Naval Special Warfare Center was chaos. Recruits shouted, instructors barked orders, and the air smelled of sweat and gun oil. Sarah stood at attention in the middle of a sea of male trainees, most of whom were twice her size. She didn't flinch when the drill instructor stopped in front of her. "Name?" he barked. "Mitchell, Sarah." The instructor glanced at his clipboard, then back at her. "You sure you're in the right place, Mitchell? This isn't admin training." A few snickers echoed from the ranks. Sarah didn't respond. He leaned closer. "You do know what this program is, right?" "Yes, sir," she said calmly. "Then prove it." The days that followed were brutal. The program pushed every limit, physically, mentally, emotionally. Recruits carried logs through the surf, ran endless miles with full packs, endured sleepless nights, and performed drills until their muscles screamed. Many dropped out in the first week. Sarah didn't. What unnerved her peers wasn't just her endurance, it was her silence. She didn't complain, didn't talk back, didn't seek approval. She listened to every instruction, absorbed every detail, and executed flawlessly. When others struggled to zero their rifles under pressure, she adjusted her windage, exhaled once, and fired, each shot landing precisely where she intended. By the end of week 2, even the instructors had started whispering about her. "The quiet one's scary good," one said during a range debrief. "It's like she's reading the wind." Commander Cole stood behind them, watching her through binoculars. He didn't say a word, but his skepticism was slowly turning into something else, curiosity. She wasn't the strongest, but she was the most consistent. In the world of snipers, consistency was everything. One evening after a grueling 14-hour day, Cole approached her on the range. She was cleaning her rifle under the orange desert sky, methodically wiping down the barrel and scope. "You're not like the others," he said finally. She didn't look up. "No, sir, you don't talk much." She smiled faintly. "Talking doesn't make me shoot straighter." Cole studied her for a moment. There was something unsettling about her composure, like a calm lake hiding deep currents beneath. "You think you can really handle what's ahead?" he asked. The cold, the isolation, the wind tearing at your face for hours while you wait for a single shot? Her hands paused briefly over the rifle. "Sir, I've been waiting for that shot my whole life." It wasn't bravado. It was truth. Cole didn't reply. He turned and walked away, but the weight of her words lingered. Over the next several weeks, Sarah's precision only sharpened. She outperformed most of her class in long-distance shooting, camouflage, and field observation. Her spot reports were perfect, her wind calls nearly psychic. Still, whispers followed her, some mocking, some admiring. "She's lucky," a few said. "The instructors go easy on her." They didn't see the blood on her knuckles, the bruises on her arms, the hours she spent perfecting every mechanical movement. One morning, during a long-range exercise, the winds shifted unpredictably. Trainees missed their marks left and right. Cole stood behind the line, clipboard in hand, silently judging. When it was Sarah's turn, she adjusted her scope slightly, took one deep breath, and fired. The steel plate rang out with a perfect ping. Cole looked through his binoculars. Dead center. He lowered them, watching as she stood, calm and expressionless. "Beginner's luck?" He called out. She shrugged. "Guess we'll see, sir." She fired again. Another perfect hit. For the first time in years, Cole found himself smiling, not out of amusement, but out of surprise. He wasn't sure if he was watching a natural talent or the start of something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about shooters. That night, as Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, the desert wind howled outside. The day's fatigue settled deep into her bones, but she couldn't sleep. She thought of home, her father teaching her to shoot at 8 years old, the stillness before each trigger pull, the trust between breath and bullet. That was where it all began, not in competition, not in recognition, but in silence. In her mind, she replayed Cole's words. "Can you handle what's ahead?" She smiled faintly in the dark. "I already am," she thought. By the time the next evaluation rolled around, the program had lost half its recruits. But Sarah remained, quiet, steady, unshakable. Commander Cole still didn't quite know what to make of her. Yet a small, unspoken truth was forming in his mind. He had underestimated her, and something told him he wouldn't be the last to do so. The desert morning arrived like a furnace, heat rising off the sand in dizzying waves. Recruits stumbled through another grueling drill. Log carries, timed sprints, obstacle courses that left muscles screaming in protest. Sarah Mitchell moved with a quiet precision never wasting energy on useless motion, her breathing steady, her eyes scanning constantly. Where others shouted to push themselves harder, she pushed in silence. Every movement calculated, every step purposeful. Every bullet fired accounted for the wind, the slope, the faintest shimmer in the heat. Commander Ethan Cole watched from the observation tower, arms crossed. Her performance irritated him. He couldn't place why. She wasn't stronger, faster, or louder than the others, yet she consistently outperformed the majority. The men in the program whispered behind her back. Some sneered, some admired, all curious. Who is this quiet girl who makes perfection look effortless? Cole's skepticism, once mild amusement, was hardening into something else, fascination wrapped in disbelief. The first time she walked up to the 800-meter range, no wind to speak of, her peers barely hit the target. Sarah adjusted her stance, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The steel plate rang out dead center. Again and again, she repeated the exercise flawlessly. She never celebrated, never smirked, never allowed her peers a chance to doubt her precision. During lunch, the men crowded around each other, joking and teasing, but Sarah sat alone under the sparse shade of a desert mesquite tree. She ate methodically, slowly, eyes on the horizon, mind running calculations. Wind speed, bullet drop, humidity, temperature. She scribbled notes in a small notebook that no one was allowed to see. Some assumed she was lost in thought. Others suspected she was recording cheat codes. No one realized she was mentally mapping the desert, calculating the factors that would one day allow her to make impossible shots. Lieutenant Brooks, observing her from a distance, whispered to Cole, "Sir, she's different. Too quiet. It's unsettling." Cole didn't respond immediately. He simply studied her, noting how even fatigue didn't shake her focus. Something about her composure was unnatural, almost mechanical. "She's not human," he muttered quietly. Weeks passed, and Sarah's silent dedication began to unsettle the rest of the recruits. They grew frustrated by their own failures and her unshakable consistency. Some tried to provoke her with insults, mocking her voice, her gender, her quietness. "Hey, rodeo girl, you sure you belong here?" One shouted during a night navigation exercise. Sarah didn't respond. She merely finished her task, leading her small team accurately to the waypoint, while the others stumbled behind her. Cole had begun attending the range exercises personally, watching her every movement with binoculars. He studied her breathing, her stance, the way she moved her fingers over the trigger. He noted her corrections in elevation and windage, all performed with near-perfect instinct. The fact that she never said a word, never explained her method, never justified her success, gnawed at him. He wanted to challenge her, to see where her limits were, but she gave him nothing to attack. One evening, after a 16-hour training day, Cole approached her at the shooting line. The desert air was cold now, the sun just dipping behind jagged ridges. The wind had picked up, shifting erratically, making targets dance. Other trainees were struggling to hit the steel plates, their frustration evident in every miss. Cole cleared his throat. "Mitchell," he said. She glanced up, expression neutral. "You're performing well. I'll give you that. But luck doesn't last forever. How do you handle pressure when it really counts?" Sarah didn't flinch. She adjusted the scope on her rifle, measured the wind, and fired. Dead center. Again and again. Cole's jaw tightened. "Pressure?" she said finally, her voice soft, measured, but carrying the weight of certainty. "Every shot is pressure. I just prepare better." Cole exhaled slowly, realizing her confidence was not arrogance, but preparation fused with innate skill. He had spent decades training elite soldiers, yet here was a young woman, silent, calm, and untouchable in her focus. The next test was meant to break recruits, a 2-day survival and marksmanship challenge. Recruits had to move across 30 kilometers of rough desert terrain, carrying 60-pound packs, set up long-distance targets, and hit them under extreme fatigue. Most men were exhausted within hours, morale crumbling. Sarah moved steadily, pacing herself, taking hydration breaks calculated to conserve energy. At every sniper station, she hit her targets perfectly, even as the men around her missed repeatedly. Her notebook, never visible to anyone, contained her calculations, wind vectors, humidity adjustments, and environmental readings, all prepared in advance. During a particularly difficult shot, the wind shifted suddenly, turning the target into a blur. Men cursed and missed, shaking their rifles. Sarah adjusted her angle, recalculated bullet drop, and fired. The plate rang out, perfect, as if she had controlled the very wind itself. Cole watched through his binoculars, awestruck. This was no luck. This was mastery. That night, around the campfire, the recruits whispered among themselves. How does she do it? It's like she's cheating. She's a machine. Sarah sat alone, meticulously cleaning her rifle. Not a single hair out of place, not a single word spoken. For her, this wasn't about proving anything. It was about mastery, precision, and control. Cole walked by, observing. He could see the respect and the fear she commanded without ever raising her voice. He realized the challenge she posed to tradition wasn't just her gender, but her approach. Calm, silent, and methodical, defying the brash, loud norms of SEAL training. One particularly grueling exercise required recruits to hit a steel plate at 1,800 meters. A test few had passed. Sarah's turn arrived late in the afternoon. The wind had picked up to an unpredictable gusting force. Recruits were whispering about impossible conditions, shaking their heads in defeat before firing. Sarah took her position. She adjusted the scope, calculated bullet drop, factored in the erratic gusts, and waited. Then, with a single squeeze, she fired. The plate rang. 2 seconds later, another shot, perfect again. Cole, watching from the tower, could no longer contain his astonishment. His previous assumptions about her being lucky, or just lucky with wind, shattered completely. Sarah Mitchell wasn't lucky. She was calculated, prepared, and deadly precise. And she never bragged, never celebrated, never offered an explanation for her ability. She let the results speak. For the first time in his career, Cole found himself questioning not her skill, but his own judgment. He had underestimated her, as he had underestimated no one in years. Yet, the thought of what she might achieve, once fully trained, fully unleashed, sent an uncomfortable thrill down his spine. As the desert night fell, Sarah lay on her bunk, exhausted but alert. She reviewed every shot of the day mentally, memorizing the environmental shifts, adjusting her mental calculations. Sleep came slowly. Outside, the desert wind whispered, and she listened, as she always did, to its subtle guidance. She wasn't training to prove anyone wrong. She was training to be perfect. And in doing so, she was quietly, irresistibly rewriting what the SEAL program thought possible. The first light of dawn crept across the jagged Nevada desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and crimson. The air was brittle with early morning chill, yet the sun promised an unforgiving day. Sarah Mitchell was already on the range, rifle in hand, spotting scope balanced against her shoulder. Around her, the other recruits fidgeted, voices low with fatigue and nerves. Today's test was designed to break them. A 2-kilometer steel plate target in shifting desert winds. At distances no one had successfully hit under these conditions. Failure was common. Success was extraordinary. Commander Ethan Cole observed from his perch on the observation tower, arms folded, jaw tight. He had seen hundreds of recruits attempt the desert challenge, and almost all failed miserably. Most overcompensated for the wind or miscalculated elevation. Some simply panicked under pressure, their hands shaking as they squeezed the trigger. Sarah's calm presence irritated him. She wasn't just surviving the drills, she was excelling quietly, almost infuriatingly so. "Let's see what she does today," Cole muttered, leaning on the railing. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Brooks, whispered, "Sir, she's going to amaze you again." Cole didn't respond. He didn't want to be amazed. He wanted to see her fail, just once, to prove his judgment wasn't flawed. The recruits lined up, rifles loaded, eyes on the distant plate glinting in the desert sun. Winds gusted unpredictably, throwing mirages across the flat expanse. Shouts from instructors cut through the morning air. "Positions! Steady! Fire!" One by one, men fired, muttering curses under their breath as the wind skewed their bullets off the mark. Plates rang hollowly with failure. A few managed to graze the edge, but no one achieved a clean hit. Sarah waited. She scanned the horizon carefully, noting the subtle shifts in the mirage, the flicker of heat, the faint ripple of wind across the sand. Her training, her years growing up on the Nevada plains, had taught her to observe patterns invisible to most. She adjusted her scope minutely, recalculated bullet drop for temperature and humidity, measured wind angles down to the millisecond. Every calculation was mental, yet precise. She lay prone, rifle steady against her shoulder. Cole squinted through binoculars. "She won't hit it," he muttered, almost to himself. Impossible conditions. No one does this. He turned slightly as Brooks nudged him. "Sir, watch her." A deep breath, slow and deliberate. Sarah's finger rested lightly on the trigger. Time seemed to stretch. Every minute movement of the target, every ripple of wind across the desert was accounted for. She exhaled once, then gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked sharply, echoing against the distant mountains. Ping, dead center. The instructors froze. Cole blinked. He replayed the shot in his mind. Could it be a fluke? No. She fired again. Ping. Perfect again. The other recruits stared in disbelief, some in awe, some in frustration. Beginner's luck? An instructor muttered, incredulous. Sarah didn't respond. She reloaded silently, her eyes scanning the horizon for any movement or anomaly. Each shot was deliberate, intentional, unstoppable. By mid-afternoon, the desert test intensified. The target was moved to 2,500 meters, a range few had attempted and fewer had succeeded. Heat waves shimmered off the sand, bending light and making the distant steel plate appear to dance. The wind picked up to 20 miles per hour, gusting sporadically across the plain. The instructors were exasperated, their patience tested. Many recruits fell to the ground, exhausted, muttering curses at the impossible conditions. Sarah, however, remained unchanged. Her breathing steady, pulse calm, focus absolute. She adjusted her calculations, compensating for both elevation and wind. Each shot was a precise marriage of experience, instinct, and preparation. With a controlled exhale, she fired. Once, twice, 3 times. Each shot rang true. Cole lowered his binoculars, jaw tight. For the first time, he wasn't merely observing. He was genuinely astonished. She's doing it," Brooks whispered. Cole didn't speak. He didn't need to. The evidence was undeniable. She was rewriting what he thought was physically possible for any sniper. That evening, when the recruits returned to the camp, exhaustion hung over everyone like a suffocating blanket. Men groaned as they collapsed onto cots, some muttering about quitting. Sarah went to her designated area, rifle cleaned and methodically inspected, notebook in hand. She reviewed every shot, every gust of wind, every flicker of light that had affected the trajectory. Her mind ran through formulas and environmental factors, even as her body began to ache with fatigue. Cole approached her quietly. She didn't look up, continuing to methodically clean her rifle. "You don't talk much," he said finally, almost rhetorically. She glanced at him, expression neutral. Talking doesn't improve accuracy. He studied her for a long minute, recognizing a truth he had been reluctant to accept. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was concentration. Her calmness wasn't arrogance. It was absolute control over herself and her environment. "Pressure," Cole said carefully, almost testing her, "can break anyone. You handle it well." She shrugged lightly. "I don't think about pressure. I think about the shot." Cole exhaled slowly. This wasn't a recruit. This was a professional, a natural talent, a force of focus honed through years of practice, discipline, and innate skill. And for the first time, he felt a twinge of unease, not at her ability, but at the possibility that she might surpass everything he had ever seen, even in himself. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's dominance in the desert test became more pronounced. She completed long-range shots at increasing distances, with environmental conditions worsening each day. The instructors began whispering about her unnatural skill, using her as an example during training sessions. Cole watched with a mixture of respect and apprehension. He knew the real test wasn't hitting targets in training. It would be under real-world conditions, with real consequences. But even as Cole prepared for that inevitable reality, he also recognized that he had underestimated her in ways he couldn't ignore. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet ranch girl from Nevada, had not just survived the desert test, she had dominated it, rewriting expectations without a word, without complaint, without show. Her silence, he realized, carried a weight greater than any boast, louder than any shout, and more powerful than any display of brute strength. That night, as the desert wind whispered through the barracks, Sarah lay awake on her cot, thinking of the day's shots. She considered the wind shifts, the humidity, the faint flicker of heat across the steel plates. Each calculation, each adjustment, each precise trigger squeeze was logged in her mind, a mental map she would carry with her always. Sleep finally came, but not before a single thought echoed through her mind. The real test is coming. I must be ready. And in that silence, she found not fear or doubt, but quiet certainty. The early morning sun was pale over the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, casting long shadows across jagged ridges and narrow valleys. The wind carried a biting chill, and the scent of dust and dry earth filled the air. For the SEAL team, this mission was unlike any training exercise. Intelligence reports confirmed that a high-value insurgent commander had been spotted moving between villages, his movements unpredictable and dangerous. Every second counted. Inside the Chinook helicopter that hummed over the rugged terrain, Sarah Mitchell, code name Whisper, sat in silence. Around her, the other SEALs checked weapons, communicated quietly over headsets, and reviewed the mission plan. Every member of the team was male, battle-hardened, and skeptical of her presence. Whispers circulated. A female sniper in a real combat scenario? Some openly doubted her ability to handle the pressure. Sarah didn't respond. She simply checked her rifle, cleaned the scope, and ran through environmental calculations in her mind. Commander Ethan Cole sat beside her, scanning the map and listening to cum chatter. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. She had dominated every training exercise, but this was real. Every shot carried consequences far beyond steel plates or mock targets. He had questioned her ability from the beginning, sometimes openly, sometimes in his own mind. Now, he had to confront reality. Her skill might be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Status? Cole asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the terrain below. Position set. Variables accounted for. Target distance confirmed, Sarah replied calmly. Her voice was low, measured, almost hypnotic in its certainty. Cole nodded, impressed despite himself. The team deployed near the ridgeline, moving with practiced stealth. Every footstep, every shift of weight, every movement was deliberate. Sarah found a vantage point nearly 3,800 meters from the suspected location of the insurgent leader. The target was partially concealed in a village courtyard, moving unpredictably as villagers went about their morning routines. At this distance, the smallest error in wind calculation, trigger squeeze, or breath control would mean failure. Cole crouched near her, his hand resting near his rifle, but his eyes fixed on her movements. Too far, he muttered, almost to himself. The wind gusted violently across the valley, rustling trees and stirring dust. Nobody hits this, he said quietly, shaking his head. Sarah adjusted the scope, her fingers deftly turning knobs as her mind accounted for temperature, wind speed, humidity, and even the curvature of the earth. The silence around her was absolute. She didn't glance at Cole, didn't acknowledge the doubt in the room. Her focus was singular, the shot. Minutes passed. Time felt distorted as the team moved silently beneath her, communicating only in gestures. She observed the target through the scope, noting the subtle shift of shadows, the way the insurgent moved between cover, and the brief moments of exposure. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing measured. In her mind, she ran the calculations one final time. Cole's voice broke the quiet. "Sarah, are you sure?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes never left the scope. Then softly, almost a whisper, "On." She fired. The rifle cracked like thunder in the valley. Time stretched, 10, 12, 15 seconds, as everyone waited. Then came the calm, target down. One shot. Silence fell. Cole's jaw tightened. He replayed the shot in his mind, scrutinizing every factor. There was no mistake, no luck, no anomaly. Sarah had accomplished something extraordinary. The mission wasn't over. Secondary targets remained, and insurgent lookouts could have spotted the team at any moment. Sarah reloaded silently, scanning for movement, adjusting her scope for potential secondary threats. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension of the men around her. They had been trained for years, yet they watched in awe as she moved with precision, almost like a ghost in the mountains. Cole finally spoke, voice low but firm. "You understand what you just did?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, still focused. "The mission is not over." Cole nodded slowly, a rare flicker of respect crossing his face. She wasn't here to prove herself to him. She was here to execute her role flawlessly, and she had done it. Hours later, after the mission concluded without casualties, the team returned to base. The weight of the operation began to settle, and for the first time, whispers about Sarah transformed from doubt to admiration. The men who had questioned her skill now studied her movements, her approach, and the calm with which she executed impossible shots. Cole met her outside the hangar. His eyes were unreadable, but there was a tension there, a tension of a man realizing he had underestimated someone in the most consequential way possible. "That was historic," he said, voice tight. Sarah only nodded, cleaning her rifle methodically. "Just doing my job, Commander." Cole studied her for a long moment. She wasn't seeking recognition. She didn't want praise. She wanted precision, mastery, silence. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's role as a sniper became the stuff of quiet legend among SEAL teams. Instructors and commanders used her mission as a teaching example, how preparation, observation, and discipline could overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. New recruits whispered about the female sniper who had executed one of the longest confirmed kills in operational history, a woman who didn't need to boast because her results spoke volumes. Cole struggled with his own pride. He had doubted her, questioned her ability, and now he found himself reflecting on lessons he had never expected to learn. That skill, focus, and determination were not bound by gender, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room could change everything. Back at the base, in the quiet moments of the night, Sarah reviewed her calculations, replayed every shot, and prepared mentally for the missions yet to come. She didn't celebrate her success, didn't boast about the record-breaking shot. For her, the mission had always been about protection, precision, and perfection. Recognition was secondary. Silence, focus, and skill were her language, and she spoke it fluently. Cole watched from a distance as she moved with purpose, methodically cleaning her weapon, adjusting her equipment, and preparing for the next operation. He realized that Sarah Mitchell was more than a sniper. She was a symbol of quiet mastery. She had shattered his preconceptions, and in doing so, had rewritten the expectations of what a SEAL sniper could achieve. And as the desert wind whispered across the base, carrying dust and memory from faraway valleys, Cole understood something he could never unsee. Sarah Mitchell's silence was not emptiness. It was power, and she had just unleashed it. The mountain wind howled like a living thing, twisting around jagged ridges and rattling loose rocks down the slopes below. The sun was barely a pale smear behind the distant peaks, yet the desert valley gleamed under the morning light. Today was unlike any previous exercise, mission, or training scenario Sarah Mitchell had faced. Today, the target was nearly 3,800 meters away, far beyond the distance any sniper in her unit had ever attempted in real conditions. Every variable, wind, temperature, humidity, even the curvature of the earth, would affect the bullet's flight. One miscalculation could spell disaster. Sarah's eyes, cold and steady as steel, scanned the valley through her spotting scope. The insurgent target had been identified earlier in the morning, moving between cover points in the village below. Villagers were beginning their routines, oblivious to the danger. The men in her team were tense, whispering among themselves, their voices heavy with doubt. None had attempted a shot at this distance under operational conditions before. Some openly questioned whether it was possible. Commander Ethan Cole crouched beside her, checking his own equipment but watching her every move. The doubt that had plagued him during training was now replaced by cautious awe. "This is beyond anything we've done," he said quietly. "Are you sure about the calculations?" Sarah didn't respond immediately. Her eyes never left the scope. She adjusted the range dial slightly, factoring in wind shifts, bullet drop, and mirage effects. "I've accounted for everything, sir," she said softly. Cole shook his head, incredulous. Nobody hits this distance consistently. Not even our best." Sarah exhaled slowly, aligning her breathing with her pulse. Her mind ran through a checklist, each step precise and rehearsed. She had spent weeks preparing for this scenario, analyzing the environment, memorizing wind patterns, studying past extreme-range shots by the military and civilian shooters alike. Every factor was in place, every calculation verified. Now it was time to act. The team moved into position silently. Communication was limited to hand signals and subtle gestures. Every step had been rehearsed, every movement calculated to avoid detection. Sarah lay prone on the rocky ledge, her rifle resting on a customized tripod, scope trained on the distant valley. The wind tore across the mountains, pushing dust into the air and bending the light in dizzying waves. Cole crouched beside her, glancing down at her mental notes scribbled on a small tablet. "You're not just taking a shot," he said, voice low. "You're rewriting the limits." "I understand," Sarah replied, voice calm, controlled. "That's why I have to make it count." The insurgent moved between cover points, unaware of the danger. Sarah tracked his movements through her scope, measuring distance, calculating drift, compensating for every environmental factor. Her breathing slowed, each inhale and exhale carefully timed. Time stretched as her mind became a singular focus. The shot. Cole glanced at the other team members. They were tense, hands gripping rifles, eyes wide with disbelief. None had seen anything like this before. A female sniper operating with the calm precision of a seasoned veteran, preparing to take a shot that most men wouldn't even attempt in training. Sarah whispered a single word. On. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked sharply across the valley. Seconds stretched into what felt like eternity as the bullet arced through the thin morning air. Dust swirled, shadows moved, and the wind continued its chaotic dance. Cole held his breath. Then came the confirmation over comms. Target down, one shot. The team froze. No one moved. Cole's eyes widened. He replayed the moment in his mind, reviewing every variable. There was no error, no misfire. Sarah had done it. She had hit a target nearly 3,800 meters away, a shot considered impossible by every standard, accomplished silently, without fanfare, without hesitation. The other SEALs stared at her in awe, mouths slightly open. Some shook their heads in disbelief. "How did she?" one whispered. Sarah simply reloaded, adjusting for secondary targets. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. For her, this was another job completed, another step in mastering her craft. Precision was her language. Silence, her signature. Cole, still crouched beside her, struggled to find words. That was beyond anything I've ever seen," he said finally. "You've just made history." Sarah nodded once, eyes still fixed on the scope. "The mission isn't over," she said softly. Cole exhaled, tension slowly leaving his shoulders. He realized the truth. Sarah Mitchell wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. She wasn't competing with the men, the system, or even him. She was executing mastery. She was rewriting the standards of what a sniper could accomplish. The rest of the day passed in a tense haze. Sarah continued to scan for secondary threats, remaining perfectly composed as the team coordinated their extraction. Every movement was calculated, every instruction silent but effective. The insurgents. Location was secure, the mission a complete success, and not a single shot beyond her first hit had been wasted. When the team returned to base, word spread quickly. Even in the military, where secrecy was paramount, whispers circulated among instructors and fellow snipers. The female sniper, who had just executed one of the longest, confirmed kills in operational history. Commander Cole, however, remained silent. He didn't seek recognition for the achievement. Instead, he simply watched Sarah clean her rifle with methodical care, quietly acknowledging that she had achieved something extraordinary. For her, this mission wasn't about glory. It was about preparation, precision, and discipline. The shot itself was secondary to mastery, the ability to control every variable, anticipate every factor, and execute flawlessly under extreme pressure. Cole finally approached her, standing over her silently. "You understand what you've just done?" he asked, voice measured but heavy with awe. Sarah looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. "Yes, sir. I did my job." Cole nodded slowly. For a man who had trained some of the most elite snipers in the world, this statement carried more weight than any medal, any accolade, any rank. That night, after the dust of the mission had settled, Sarah reviewed every shot, every calculation, every environmental variable. She didn't brag, didn't seek acknowledgement, didn't allow herself to revel in the record-breaking achievement. She was preparing, always preparing, for the next challenge, the next mission, the next impossible shot. Commander Cole watched from a distance, finally understanding the quiet truth he had resisted. Skill, determination, and mastery were not measured by noise, bravado, or gender. They were measured by focus, preparation, and execution. And Sarah Mitchell had just redefined every standard he had ever known. The base was quiet that evening, the desert wind whistling softly through sand-swept streets. Most of the team had retired to their bunks, but the aftermath of the mission still hung heavy in the air. Whispers traveled quickly among the SEAL instructors, the officers, and even the new recruits, the female sniper who had just completed the impossible. Sarah Mitchell sat alone in the corner of the shooting range, rifle meticulously cleaned and reassembled, her notebook open on the rock beside her. She scribbled numbers, corrections, and observations in precise, tiny handwriting. Each note reflected the subtle adjustments she had made for the 3,800-meter shot. Wind shifts, mirage distortions, bullet drop, temperature, and even minute variations in the Earth's curvature. She didn't look up when Commander Ethan Cole approached. Cole studied her silently for a moment. He had spent decades training snipers, overseeing operations, and managing elite teams. He had seen extraordinary talent before, but nothing like this. His mind replayed the morning's events, the shot, the silence, the calm precision that had ensured success against impossible odds. "You're remarkable," he said finally, voice low. Not a compliment he gave lightly. Sarah looked up briefly, her gray eyes steady, unreadable. "I did my job, sir." Cole's jaw tightened. "It wasn't just your job. That shot to 3,800 meters. It's historic. Nobody else could have done that under those conditions." She shrugged, almost imperceptibly. "I prepared. I accounted for everything. I fired." Cole took a slow breath. "You didn't just fire. You redefined what's possible for a sniper." Her gaze returned to her notebook. For Sarah, history didn't matter. Perfection mattered. Precision mattered. Preparation mattered. And she had delivered all three, quietly, flawlessly, without a single word of self-congratulation. The story of the 3,800-meter shot spread fast, even within the classified military channels. Rumors began circulating, whispered in training rooms and officer lounges. "Did you see her shot?" some asked. "It's unreal. Nobody's ever hit that distance before in operational conditions." Some men openly questioned her ability at first, dismissing the accomplishment as luck or exaggeration. But those who had seen the mission, studied the data, or trained alongside her could no longer deny it. Sarah Mitchell had done something impossible, and she had done it silently. Cole watched these reactions with a mixture of pride and unease. For years, he had prided himself on being objective, impartial, and unshakable in his judgments. But Sarah had challenged all of that. She had forced him to confront his assumptions about gender, about potential, about what it took to be a master sniper. And she had done it without arguing, without bragging, without demanding acknowledgement. A few days after the mission, Cole called Sarah into his office. The walls were lined with framed marksman certificates, photos of past missions, and historical targets. He gestured toward a blank space on one wall. "You know," he began, "we've never had a sniper like you here. Quiet, precise, unstoppable. You've changed the way I look at this program. Your skills, your focus, it's extraordinary." Sarah didn't smile. She remained calm, seated, notebook open. "Thank you, sir," she said simply. Cole shook his head. "I think you underestimate what you've done. This isn't just skill. This is perfection. And it's rare. It's historic. And I need you to understand how remarkable that is." Her eyes flicked up at him briefly. "I understand," she said quietly. But I don't measure it that way. I measure preparation, execution, accuracy. Everything else is noise. Cole felt a strange mix of admiration and humility. He had spent decades evaluating marksmen, pushing them to limits he thought absolute. And yet Sarah had shown him that limits were relative, and mastery could be achieved without bravado, without announcements, without the need for recognition. Meanwhile, the SEAL instructors began incorporating Sarah's data into their training programs. They studied her wind calculations, her target tracking, her adjustment methods. New recruits were introduced to her example, the ghost of 3,800 meters, a symbol of quiet excellence. Some students tried to emulate her precision, but few could maintain her level of focus and consistency under pressure. Sarah continued to train silently, never flaunting her achievements. She preferred observation, measurement, and personal mastery over praise or attention. Even when colleagues attempted to engage her in conversation about the shot, she remained distant, replying briefly and then returning to her work. This calm detachment only increased the team's fascination with her. Cole, too, found himself reflecting constantly on her methods. He replayed her shots, scrutinized her decisions, and found lessons in every movement. She had become his benchmark, a standard he had never expected to respect so deeply, much less admire. One evening, the commander gathered the sniper team for a debrief. The focus of the discussion was the mission, but the shadow of Sarah's shot hung over every word. "You've all seen her work," Cole began, tone measured. "What she did is not luck. It's precision, preparation, discipline, and silence. Learn from it. Respect it. And most importantly, understand that skill isn't defined by noise or confidence. It's defined by results." The team nodded. The younger recruits, inspired and awed, scribbled notes. The veterans, some skeptical at first, now recognized that her methodical approach, unflappable composure, and technical mastery were extraordinary. Sarah, sitting silently at the back, didn't seek attention. She merely listened, absorbed the debrief, and mentally logged the next steps for improvement. For her, every mission, every shot, every variable was a chance to grow, refine, and perfect. Later that night, Cole found Sarah on the range, working alone. The moonlight reflected off her scope, and her rifle lay meticulously assembled, precision tools beside her. She was adjusting calculations, recording data, replaying the shot in her mind. The silence of the desert enveloped her like a cloak, yet the intensity of her focus radiated outward, almost palpable. Cole approached quietly. "You know," he said softly, "most people would brag, seek fame, or at least celebrate. You don't. Why?" Sarah didn't pause. "Celebration doesn't improve my aim, sir. Precision does. Mastery does. I measure myself by results, not applause." Cole exhaled slowly. For a man who had spent his life judging others, he realized that Sarah had redefined his understanding of achievement. She had shattered every expectation, quietly, with methodical excellence. "You've changed the program," he said finally. "Changed the way I see everything." She nodded once. "Good, then I've done my job." Cole studied her for a long moment. He didn't just see a sniper. He saw a legacy in the making, a quiet, powerful force that would redefine standards for generations to come. And as the desert wind whispered over the empty range, carrying dust and memories of impossible shots, he finally understood the truth. Sarah Mitchell's silence was not weakness. It was power. The barracks were unusually quiet that morning, the desert sun casting long, sharp shadows across the concrete and sand. Sarah Mitchell moved through the range with the same silent precision she always had, rifle in hand, scanning distant targets and making notes in her worn notebook. But something had changed. The whispers of awe and disbelief had grown louder, now spoken openly among her team and instructors. Her 3,800-meter shot had become legend within the unit, a story retold with awe in briefings, training sessions, and casual conversations alike. Commander Ethan Cole watched from the observation tower, binoculars trained on her as she adjusted her scope with methodical care. There was pride in his gaze, tempered with a hint of amazement. He had spent decades evaluating the world's finest snipers, and yet Sarah Mitchell had redefined his understanding of what was possible. Quietly, without seeking acknowledgement, she had earned a respect that few men in the program had ever commanded. Cole descended from the tower, moving toward the range, his boots crunching on the gravel. As he approached, Sarah didn't acknowledge him, focused entirely on lining up the next shot. He stopped a few feet behind her, observing her technique, the subtle adjustment of her stance, the almost imperceptible tilt of her wrist, the calm, controlled exhale before the trigger. "You've done it again," Cole said softly, almost rhetorically. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She fired a precise shot, pinging the steel target dead center, and reloaded with quiet efficiency. Finally, she looked up, gray eyes steady. "Did I miss something, sir?" Cole shook his head slowly. "No, you hit it perfectly. Again, every shot, every time." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You know, I've trained snipers for decades. I've seen some of the best. And yet, you've made them all look ordinary." Sarah nodded slightly, expression unreadable. "I just do my job." Cole studied her for a moment, realizing that her approach was more than just skill. It was philosophy. She didn't seek praise or recognition. She didn't measure herself against others. She measured herself by precision, preparation, and execution. And in doing so, she had become a standard-bearer, a living example of mastery for the entire program. Later that day, the instructors gathered the team for a debrief. The mission data, environmental conditions, and shot trajectories were displayed on screens, analyzed meticulously. Even among hardened SEALs, Sarah's performance inspired a mixture of awe and disbelief. Every variable, every calculation, every minor adjustment she had made was documented and studied. "Take note," Cole instructed, pointing to the screen displaying her 3,800-meter shot. "This is how it's done. Not with luck, not with arrogance, not with noise, with preparation, focus, and discipline. Every movement, every calculation mattered. This is mastery. Learn from it?" The team nodded, scribbling notes and discussing methods to replicate her analytical approach. For once, their attention wasn't on physical strength or speed. It was on mental precision, patience, and observation. Sarah sat quietly in the back, observing the discussion, adding mental notes, refining calculations, but saying nothing. Her silence, once a source of curiosity and even skepticism, had become a model for the other recruits. They watched her now, not to mock, not to question, but to learn. Over the following weeks, Sarah's reputation continued to grow. Stories of her record-breaking shot traveled beyond the unit, quietly reaching senior leadership, instructors at other bases, and even intelligence analysts who studied extreme-range sniping. She became a reference point, a standard against which other snipers were measured. Despite this growing recognition, Sarah remained unchanged. She didn't boast, didn't flaunt her achievements, and didn't allow her growing legend to affect her focus. Every day she trained harder, observed more carefully, and calculated more precisely. For her, mastery was ongoing. Success was a process, not a destination. Cole noticed this consistency, a rare quality even among the most elite operators. He often found himself reflecting on lessons he hadn't expected to learn from a young female sniper: patience, humility, and the quiet power of disciplined focus. He had doubted her at the beginning, questioned her capabilities, and even tested her limits. Now, he was forced to acknowledge that she had surpassed not only his expectations, but the conventional standards of the entire program. One afternoon, Cole called Sarah into the command tent. A small group of senior officers was present, reviewing operational data and discussing upcoming missions. Cole's expression was serious, but measured. "Sarah," he began, "your performance on the last mission, the 3,800-meter shot, it wasn't just remarkable. It was historic. You've set a new standard for snipers everywhere. I want you to understand that, officially and personally, your contribution has changed the way we evaluate skill, focus, and execution." Sarah nodded silently, eyes calm and steady. "Thank you, sir," she replied softly. Cole studied her, realizing that her humility and calm were as important as her skill. "Do you know what the others are saying about you?" he asked. "I don't measure myself by others, sir," she said. "I measure by precision, preparation, and execution." Cole smiled faintly, finally understanding. "Then I guess you're teaching them something they didn't expect, that excellence doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real." Sarah's eyes flicked up briefly, a hint of acknowledgement. "Exactly, sir." That evening, back on the range, Sarah continued her training as the sun dipped below the mountains. Cole stood silently nearby, watching her move with the same precision and focus that had defined her career. He realized that she had earned not just respect, but a quiet influence over the team and the program. The recruits no longer whispered skepticism, they whispered admiration. The instructors no longer questioned her skill, they sought to understand it. Sarah's work had become a benchmark, a model of discipline and mastery. Cole, once her most vocal skeptic, now regarded her with deep respect. He recognized that her approach, methodical, quiet, precise, was more powerful than any loud display of strength or bravado. And as the desert wind stirred, carrying dust across the range, Cole understood a profound truth. Sarah Mitchell had not just hit a record-breaking target. She had transformed the culture around her. She had shown that mastery, patience, and focus could surpass assumptions, expectations, and prejudice. She had earned respect silently, powerfully, and irrevocably. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's legend spread quietly through the military community. Reports circulated about her 3,800-meter shot, her methodology, and her unwavering composure under pressure. She became an example in training programs, a symbol of the highest standards of sniper precision, and a mentor for recruits who sought to emulate her discipline and focus. Yet through it all, Sarah remained the same, silent, precise, and relentless in her pursuit of perfection. Recognition, accolades, or even fame were irrelevant to her. For Sarah Mitchell, mastery was measured in results, not noise. And with every calculated shot, every meticulous note, and every silent hour of practice, she continued to redefine what it meant to be a sniper. The desert was quiet as dawn broke over the Nevada training grounds, the sand and rock bathed in pale gold. Sarah Mitchell stood alone atop a ridge, rifle slung across her shoulder, notebook in hand. She had long since stopped seeking recognition for her achievements. Her 3,800-meter shot, once a whispered legend, had become a defining moment in the SEAL program. Yet she remained unchanged, methodical, precise, and unwavering in her dedication to mastery. Commander Ethan Cole observed from a distance, arms folded, eyes tracking her movements. He had spent decades leading elite teams, training some of the best snipers in the world. And yet he had never encountered anyone like Sarah. Her calm precision, her quiet focus, her refusal to measure success by anything other than preparation and execution. It had challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Cole finally approached her, careful not to startle her focus. "You've changed this program," he said quietly. "Not just with your skill, but with your approach. The men respect you. The instructors study your methods. And I've learned from you. Sarah nodded slightly, expression calm and unreadable. I'm just doing my job, sir. Cole shook his head, a rare smile tugging at his lips. It's more than that. You've redefined the limits of what's possible. The SEAL program had adapted in subtle but profound ways. Training routines were revised to emphasize observation, environmental analysis, and mental discipline, inspired by Sarah's methodology. New recruits were introduced to her example, learning not just the mechanics of shooting, but the art of patience, calculation, and focus. Instructors cited her techniques during briefings, analyzing her record-breaking shot as a benchmark for future snipers. Sarah, however, remained removed from the attention. She did not lecture, she did not mentor openly, and she did not seek accolades. Instead, she trained silently, refining her skills, studying environmental factors, and perfecting her calculations. Her notebook, filled with meticulously detailed notes on wind vectors, temperature, and trajectory adjustments, became a personal map of mastery. Cole often found himself watching her from a distance, reflecting on the lessons she had taught without ever intending to. Patience, humility, discipline, and the power of silence. Qualities he had valued, but rarely seen embodied so completely. Sarah's presence challenged his assumptions, reshaped his understanding of excellence, and forced him to confront the subtle biases he hadn't even realized he held. Months passed, and Sarah continued to execute assignments with flawless precision. Operational missions, long-range reconnaissance, and sniper exercises all became opportunities to refine her skills. Each successful engagement reinforced her quiet reputation, the ghostly marksman who could strike targets beyond conventional limits, unseen and uncelebrated. Other snipers watched her with a mix of awe and respect, studying her movements and methodology. Some tried to replicate her approach, but few could sustain her level of focus under pressure. Even seasoned veterans found themselves humbled by her consistency and composure. Cole noticed the change in the team. The men who had once questioned her ability now deferred to her judgment in critical moments. Her calm decisiveness had become a stabilizing force, inspiring confidence and discipline. And yet, she never demanded authority. She earned it through action alone. One evening, after a long day of range exercises, Cole approached Sarah again. The desert wind had cooled, and the sun dipped below the distant mountains, casting a soft glow across the valley. "You've left a mark on this program that won't fade," he said quietly. "The men respect you. The instructors respect you. And I've learned more from watching you than from decades of experience." Sarah cleaned her rifle with deliberate precision, eyes on the scope. "I've only done what's necessary," she said softly. "Mastery is about preparation, focus, and execution. Recognition is irrelevant." Cole studied her for a long moment. Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that transcended rank, experience, and expectation. "And yet, your silence speaks louder than any words could," he admitted. Sarah nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Results speak for themselves, sir." Cole smiled faintly, finally understanding the full measure of her impact. She had transformed not just the standards of sniping, but the culture of the team itself. Patience, focus, and quiet excellence had replaced arrogance, noise, and impulsive bravado. Years later, Sarah Mitchell's legend persisted. Her record-breaking 3,800-meter shot became a case study in sniper precision, cited in manuals, briefings, and training programs worldwide. Young recruits memorized her approach, instructors dissected her methodology, and elite operators drew inspiration from her calm focus. Yet for Sarah, the legacy wasn't in the recognition or the records. It was in the mastery itself, the continual refinement of skill, the relentless pursuit of precision, and the quiet understanding that excellence requires discipline above all else. She continued to train, to observe, and to execute with perfect calm, leaving an indelible mark, not through words, but through action. Cole, long a voice of authority in the SEAL program, often reflected on the lessons she had taught him. That skill transcends expectation. That quiet focus can achieve the impossible. And that true mastery requires patience, preparation, and unyielding dedication. Sarah had shattered stereotypes, redefined limits, and commanded respect without ever raising her voice. In the desert, on the ridge where the wind whispered through rocks and sand, Sarah stood alone once more. Her scope adjusted, her rifle ready, her notebook open. She observed the terrain, noted wind shifts, and calculated every variable with the same intensity that had defined her career from the beginning. Every shot, every mission, every calculation was a testament to her dedication, her focus, and her philosophy. Cole approached quietly, watching her work. "You've created a standard," he said softly. "One that will last long after we're gone." Sarah looked up briefly, expression calm. "Standards are for those who follow. I focus on mastery." Cole nodded, understanding that in her silence, in her precision, and in her unwavering commitment to excellence, she had created something far greater than recognition or fame. She had created a legacy, one of discipline, quiet strength, and limitless potential. As the desert wind carried dust and shadows across the range, Sarah Mitchell stood perfectly still, rifle ready, notebook open, eyes on the horizon. She was a sniper, a master, a legend. She was proof that silence can be louder than words, focus stronger than doubt, and precision more powerful than any display of strength. And in that silence, she had conquered the impossible.